Okay, it's time to start talking about CSS. And maybe we need a tranquil moment first. In the CSS Zen Garden. Your textbook talks about the Zen Garden. It was a fascinating experiment, now closed, but it's all here archived for you to go look at. Just to put in CSSZengarden.com or Google Zen Garden, you'll find it. An experiment to show how CSS can change the presentation of a very basic HTML document into wildly different things. Because remember, till now we've been using the 2x4s, the electrical system, the plumbing system to build a structure. But CSS can take those same basic structures that we've created, if we created good ones, and then it can change them into all kinds of different houses, or in this case, all kinds of different websites from that same basic structure. So this experiment was, and I hope you can look through some yourself. I'll just take a moment here. In this experiment, you can download these two files, an HTML file and a CSS file, a basic starting CSS file. The HTML file, let's take a look at it. And here it is now. If you go up to the top, there's a bunch of links and meta names and things in the head area. That's no big deal. There are a number of notes here that explain to you what's going on here and how you can do it and so on. That's all fine. And then the body begins. And what do we have? We have a div. You've seen those before. We have a section. You've heard about that. We have an H1, an H2, an ABBR. You used one of those before, right? We have a div, and inside of it a paragraph with another ABBR, another paragraph with a link in it, in Ahref. You should be able to see that. But look at the text. CSS Zen Garden, the beauty of CSS design, a demonstration of what can be accomplished through any style sheet, CSS-based design, select any style sheet, so on and so forth. The road to enlightenment, littering a dark and dreary road, lay past the relics of browser-specific tags incompatible. So what? What's going on? Well, let's look at this site. CSS Zen Garden, the beauty of CSS design, a demonstration of what can be accomplished, so on and so forth. The road to enlightenment, littering a dark and dreary road. All the text that's there is here. And, by the way, all the text that's there is in all these pages too. These pages, all these pages have exactly the same HTML. The beauty of CSS design, a demonstration, the road to enlightenment, littering the dark. What's changed is the CSS. Background images, colors, fonts, structure, the widths, margins, layout, everything is changed. All the links are all the same. Archives is the same. All the text is the same. So the structure is the same. The presentation is changed. Let's look at another one. I always like the robot one. It's actually a little animation that happens there. You can have animation in CSS, little bits of animation. Zen Garden, beauty of design, a demonstration, the road to enlightenment. So what is this all about? You see our background, we're scrolling over it, which is also CSS. Participation, background images, all CSS, benefits, requirements. The text is all the same. On and on. And there's hundreds of these here, all using the same HTML and showing you how CSS can change it so dramatically. And of course, you can look at the CSS in these files if you wish. So that's the power of CSS and what it's meant for. And finally, we can try to make things look pretty if you want to. Let's go through the presentation. But you have to learn the codes, and the grammar is a little bit different. The way CSS works is we have a selector, which might go to an HTML element or an ID or a class, but it's going to link to the HTML. A selector, we're selecting out some HTML, maybe just one element, maybe a big chunk of stuff. And we're going to choose a property for that and give that property a value. The property might be color. The value might be red. Or, and by the way, this curly brackets are necessary. The colon is necessary. The semicolon is necessary. Or we have a selector with one property value, another property value, another property value. We can gain these up. This is a declaration. This is a declaration block. This whole declaration of block affects the same selector. Examples. An H1, color green. The H1 will now be green. A paragraph. That means all paragraphs, actually. Font size, small. Font family, sans serif. You're going to learn more about type in just in a little while in the next presentation and what sans serif means. Margins, 2EM. You should have learned it by reading chapter 12. And you should have read chapter 12 by now before you view this presentation and start into CSS. You'll learn what EMs are too. Kind of a unit of measurement, kind of a flexible one, sort of. If measures with units are used, these are written as one word. So we could have written pixels and other units, but whenever we use a unit with a number, there's no space between it. And this grammar, this structure, this spelling, and this punctuation is all absolutely has to be perfect, or else it doesn't work. Another example in context. Imagine we have a head. This is where the style, in an embedded style sheet, the style stuff goes in the head area, right? And then we'd have to close our head before we get to the body. So this time's paragraph, font size small, font family sans serif. It wouldn't affect just the paragraph. It'd also affect inline elements within the paragraph. And that's the idea of inheritance, which you should read about. If we apply something to, for instance, the body, some things will apply to everything that's a subset of the body, and everything except for the head, which is not displayed, right? Everything is a subset of the body. Imagine this page with H1s, divs, paragraphs, more paragraphs, inline elements, so on and so forth. If we applied a font family, for instance, to body, it would apply to all of them. Many properties are inherited. The cascade applies to this cascade of styles. They inherit down through all kinds of elements, but also multiple styles can be applied from multiple locations to impact the same element. And the cascade determines which style wins and actually controls the element. It's not unusual to apply one font to the entire body, but then change it for a certain element. Okay, so we really then applied two different fonts to an element. Once it was applied through inheritance to the entire body, and once it was applied specifically, separate one was applied specifically to an element. In the cascade, if we're wondering about what has the most power in the cascade, you can read about this. Browser defaults are the weakest level. So the browser has certain ideas of how it wants to display things. Then the user can set some settings himself, herself with the browser. They usually don't, though. External style sheets, which are what you're going to end up using, really, are actually weaker than some of these other things. But that's okay, because they are very useful. Imported style sheets, don't ignore those. Embedded style sheets is what you've used so far. It's putting the CSS written directly into the head element. Inline styles, do not use these. We do not use CSS directly in our document, even though it is very powerful in the cascade. And then you could mark something really important, either the author or the reader, using this symbol here. But we won't worry about that either much. What you really want to worry about is, are you going to use an external style sheet or an embedded style sheet? And the great power of the external style sheet is that a separate CSS document linked in the HTML head controls the styles for all the documents. So if you decide I want to change the font throughout my entire site of hundreds of pages, I only have one place to go to change it, because the same style sheet is affecting all the HTML documents, as opposed to having to go to every one and change it in the head area of every one. So specificity in rule order. If there's a style conflict, and they often are if we make them intentionally, let's imagine that idea of a font. We applied a font to the entire body. Then we applied a particular font to H2s. Well, if it's the more specific rule wins. So the H2 rule would win, because it isn't applied to the whole body, it's applied to a particular element. So the H2 would get the font that you chose just for that one, even though there's a kind of a conflict created. The other part of the cascade that we have to think about is the rule order. So if two rules have the same specificity, we apply to the same H2, we apply one font and then we apply another font. The second rule wins. The rule which is closest to the bottom of the CSS file wins. So rule order is part of it also. Okay, talking about CSS, we must talk about the box model. You've been using the box model all along, and you never really knew it. The box model is that everything, every inline block element, frankly, every grouping sectioning element also, is in a box. In this box, we have the content, the thing that it's described. It might be an image, it might be text, it's usually one or the other, and it has a certain size. Around it is padding. There's some default padding in almost every element. And then around that is a border. Border, if you don't give it a color and give it a size, it's invisible, but it's always there. And then around that is margin. So this is everything from the body has these things, how we control the body, the margins of the entire page is through the body, to a little single word paragraph has these things. Every inline and block element has these things. And we control the page layout a lot and the spacing through the box model. You want to see the boxes? We did this on the table element, table exercise, remember? But let's look at something. I'm going to grab this text. Oh, sorry. Border 1px solid blue. I gotta remember that. Hold on. Okay, back again. Remember this, what page was this? This is the cover letter page. And it looks like this, right? Okay. Sorry, I've already added the boxes here. It didn't sense the change. Let's look at it without the boxes first, which I should have done. Okay, this is the way it normally looks, right? But what if I could tell every box to appear, right? How do we do that? Well, if we gave everything, and the universal selector is the asterisk, we give everything, truly everything, a border of 1 pixel, solid, not dotted, not one. There's actually quite a number of styles of border, and we give the color blue. If we do those things, then and we save it, we run it. Now, every element from the body, which is the outside here, that line, to the H1, which includes an image, to the H2, to a paragraph, which had a strong in it and an EM in it, inline elements, block elements. If I had grouping elements, everything in here has a box around it. And we can work with that box, do things to that box, make it bigger, smaller, add margin, padding, change the color of it, and so on. Okay, enough for the demonstration. Let's continue along. There's lots of ways we can make a block, remember, of a number of different commands to go with one selector, or we can take a bunch of selectors. Take UL, B, H1. This would mean that each of these things would be the color blue. Unordered list, B elements, and H1s would be blue. All of them in this file, whatever it would be. Universal selector, I just showed you that. We can add an ID with universal selector. That would mean everything inside the element with an ID of footer. Not everything in the page, but there's no comma here, right? So it wouldn't be the footer and everything. And there's no comma. The two selectors work together to become more specific. Descendant selectors, this is an example of what I mean here. This isn't UL and B elements. UL is unordered list, right? This is B elements within a UL will be blue. So that's how we start to get exactly to the text we want to style, right? ID selectors. We could give something like a single list element, an ID, a phone in this case. And then we can say, remember, ID should only be used. We could say LI, hashtag phone. That's really the same thing as just saying hashtag phone. This is in the CSS here. So this would be the HTML. This is the CSS. So now an LI as an ID, a phone, will be blue. We can just use the hashtag because there's only one of these, of IDs. We can use class selectors. So here we have a paragraph, we've given it a class of special. And there's the text. What happens to that text? P.special, that means paragraphs with a class of special will be blue. If there's only one of those, great. Anything with a class of special will be blue. If we just give this. Or here we just say paragraphs with a class of special. Because there's other things that have a class of special. That's the end of part 1. I'll go on to part 2 in just a moment. Oops, I'm sorry. Actually, that's the end of that presentation.